Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the launch webinar of the Action Guide for Building Socially Connected Communities. My name is Jillian Orkusin, and I am proud to serve as Executive Director of the Foundation for Social Connection. We are thrilled to come together today to discuss how local leaders like yourselves can advance community connection and belonging. We invite you to introduce yourselves in the chat and to help us by answering the polls that will appear today throughout the webinar. If at any point you have a question that you would like to ask our speakers, please use the Q&A feature and we will address them at the end of the presentation. We hope that you've already been able to review or read through the action guide, but don't fret if not, we will drop the link in the chat at the end of the session. Additionally, our discussion will be recorded and sent out to all registrants in the coming days, along with links to resources mentioned. The Foundation for Social Connection is a nonprofit organization that engages in education, increases public awareness, promotes innovative research, and spurs the development and implementation of evidence-based models to address social isolation, loneliness, and social connection. We are so happy to co-host this webinar today with some of our close partners at Healthy Places by Design, who were instrumental in supporting the development of the guide. I would also like to take a moment to thank lead authors Abigail Barth, Shannon Vivajal, and Ashley Kronbach for their leadership and commitment to the development and release of this incredible product. I am excited to pass it over now to Phil Bors from Healthy Places by Design, who traveled with us earlier this year to conduct 4 community listening sessions, and who will now set further context around the issue and guide us in a brief reflection. Over to you.
Thank you, Jillian. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here along with my Healthy Places by Design teammates. Becky Snyderman and Joanne Lee are here to help us with our real-time group conversation for different parts of the webinar. Healthy Places by Design is a national nonprofit that helps local leaders and coalitions with their own community-led strategies for health, equity, and social connection. We also work with funders who invest in these communities. We won't dwell on this today, but we're facing a global crisis of disconnection. Research has shown that social isolation has gotten worse in recent decades. More people are living alone and have been less involved in community groups. And even after the first wave of the pandemic, we know that 58% of adults still feel lonely. Nearly a quarter of young adults say they don't know a single neighbor. And we've seen a general decline in the trust people feel with other Americans. To address this, it's important that we explore ways to collectively work for change in our communities and create connection. Most likely, you've come to this webinar because you're aware of this trend of social isolation within your community, and maybe as something you've experienced yourself and with family. The evidence is clear that social isolation has negative impacts on our physical, cognitive, mental, and economic health. And at the same time, socially connected communities are found to be healthier, safer, more resilient, and more economically prosperous. These points are well documented in the action guide that we're going to be talking about today, as well as the 2023 Surgeon General's advisory on social isolation and loneliness. In addition to the data describing the magnitude of the problem, these resources can help you paint a picture of connection and isolation where you live and work. So let's move beyond the bigger picture and get a little bit closer to the ground where you live and work. We know you're all experts in your own communities, and we'd love to hear about social connection where you are. We're going to spend a few minutes answering these questions, and we'll do that. We used these questions in the in-person community listening sessions that Jillian mentioned earlier. But in a minute, we're going to ask your opinion. So how do people experience social connection? What assets create social connectedness? And what's driving social isolation in your community? We'll put the questions on the screen in the chat for reference and answer these one at a time, but we're going to be using Mentimeter platform. So don't provide your responses in the chat. You can definitely get to Mentimeter fairly easily, whether it's on your computer, your tablet, or even your phone. And you can see this. Becky has created these the 3 questions in Mentimeter, which you can go to right now. For me, it was easiest to just use my phone and grab the QR code, which will take you right to the first question. It's also okay, again, if you want to use your computer or tablet using the link, the menti.com link, and then the code, which you can copy from the chat. If you're dialing in by phone, or for whatever reason you can't see the computer image right now, you'll at least be able to hear the responses from what others who are here are saying today. So we're going to go ahead and see what's coming in. I already see some good stuff, and we're going to look at this together. And Jillian, if you just unmute and tell me if you can see the screen.
Yes, I can see it.
Great. Okay, so how do people experience social connection? We'll hear some through public spaces, parks, community squares, libraries, and events, cultural festivals, holidays, etc. Faith communities, eating group meals, walking groups and music events, festivals, neighborhood or public spaces, doing good together, multicultural celebrations, going to sporting events. Oh, interesting, through HOA meetings and community sales, walking pets and park activities, virtual, phone, and online through front porch connection programs. Yes, neighborhood potlucks, volunteering, large art projects, so sports groups and festivals, stopping to say hi to neighbors and neighborhood associations. So the way people experience it is in different ways. Some of them look more organized, or they're at a particular place. In other cases, it's very happenstance, someone you might see on the street. Living in a community with good neighbors in the truest sense. And one more, maybe, connection among students means that young people feel safe, seen, and supported, and can show up as their full selves to learn. Thanks very much. Why don't we go on to the next question? And this one is a little bit different. We'd like you to limit your answers to 1 or 2 words. And we will see what this will populate a word cloud in Mentimeter. And we'll see what we come up with. So what are assets in your community that create social connectedness? 1 or 2 words. Go ahead and type it into whether you're using your phone or your computer. Church and parks, community centers. Again, festivals are places to create social connectedness. Safety, walkable spaces, empowerment and culture, respect. You see farmers market as a venue, libraries, volunteer opportunities. Yes, these are good. Time bank, senior centers. It's like parks, church, community centers are in the lead here. Libraries, absolutely, is a significant part of the social infrastructure. Libraries, sidewalks. Others that I see, nonprofits, vibrant downtown, shared hardship. So you can see how other people are sensing and where they seek social connectedness is an asset in their community. Okay, again, parks, libraries, community centers, all strong assets for creating social connectedness. Thank you for sending these in. And one thing we want to note is that we're happy to provide a PDF of these so we can see what everyone was sharing. Let's go to the next question. So now, using 1 or 2 words, what drives social isolation, loneliness, and disconnection in your community? And go ahead and hit enter when you're ready. Netflix was the first thing I saw. Capitalism. car-centric development, language barriers, lack of understanding, death, yes, age, fear, disability, big houses, single-family homes, racism, COVID, lack of transportation, lack of resources, inaccessible spaces, fear, social media, trauma, not walkable, so unwalkable communities, the high cost of living, again, fear of COVID infection, stigma and discrimination, extremism, gentrification, time and poverty, yeah. So we're so glad that you could help us reflect on these. I think that you can get a sense of how common these barriers are and the assets are across communities. Thank you for participating in this conversation through Mentimeter today. We know you're here because social connection is important to you, which is why the Foundation for Social Connection has led the way in creating the action guide that Jillian will now introduce to you, and I'll stop sharing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Phil, for taking us through that reflection. I, for one, was just moving my eyes, throughout that whole thing, trying to see all the different words. And, it was wonderful to read all about the assets of your different communities. So thank you for that rich reflection. So we're turning back to the action guide here. And, we want to talk a little bit about, why we decided to develop this. And really, over the years at the Foundation, Healthy Places by Design and our network of partners have worked to advance social connection. We found that research and solutions focus more so on individuals rather than the overarching structural issues that impact communities and drive disconnection. Specifically, our various initiatives with community leaders and partners highlighted 2 points. First, that leaders across the country see the importance of advancing social connectedness and belonging in their own communities. And second, that local leaders are seeking guidance to take action to strengthen these qualities in their communities. To equip change makers, including government officials, nonprofit leaders, small business owners, and cross-sector innovators, we created this action guide to provide practical supports to advance connection and belonging in communities. In order for community-wide connectedness to occur, we believe that 7 conditions must be met, including changing community member and leader beliefs, addressing power dynamics and relationships, and addressing policy and environmental factors. You can find more information about our conditions for change embedded on the homepage. And here we highlight 3 key beliefs that inspire the guide's contents. We believe that 1, community members and leaders are the experts of their own communities, and that they can determine the best courses of action to suit their unique contexts. 2, an equity approach is critical for healthy social connection. Historical wrongs such as systemic racism and disinvestment of communities have led many to become fractured and traumatized. We aim to integrate an equity perspective in our approach by focusing on the following central questions. Who has not been included in the conversation to date? Who is at most risk of disconnection? And what are the root causes that have contributed to our current condition of social connection? And 3, we believe that meaningful long-term change will occur through collaboration, systems change strategies, and the inclusion of community member perspectives. You can read more about our development team on the About page of the guide, which lists partner organizations and our many helpful contributors. We also want to take a moment to thank the local leaders from Atlanta, Georgia, Bangor, Maine, West Suburban Hennepin County, Minnesota, and San Antonio, Texas, who co-hosted our listening sessions this spring and influenced the guide's development. Together, we spent the last year on a journey visualized on this slide, starting with an extensive review of existing resources for community leaders. We then traveled to Bangor, San Antonio, Atlanta, and Hennepin County in March and April to learn firsthand from city officials, community organizations, and residents about what social connection means to them and what their community needs to address barriers to connection. With the help of the Foundation's Scientific Advisory Chair, Dr. Julianne Holt-Lunstedt, and her graduate students, we analyzed the key themes that emerged from these conversations to help shape the content, resources, and activities in our guide. Given the guide's focus on empowering local leaders and our belief that these individuals are the experts of their community needs, it was important for us to continuously call upon them as we developed the guide. In May, we held a call with various mayors to discuss this issue from their perspective. And in August, we hosted a virtual listening session with San Diego leaders to continue our collective learning across different communities in the United States. Although the guide is live, our process is of course not over. We encourage you to test utilizing the guide and its contents for yourselves and to let us know how we can continue to improve it. I will now pass it back to Phil for a fireside chat with a key informant for the guide, the wonderful Reverend Ann Helmke.
So we're very lucky to spend a little time with Ann Helmke today, who we've learned from and had many conversations with over the past year. Ann, thank you for always fitting those conversations in. Ann helps lead a citywide initiative of local officials, faith leaders, nonprofit groups, and community members called Compassionate San Diego. Ann's an ordained, San Antonio.
Okay.
Ann's an ordained Lutheran minister and the faith liaison for the city of San Antonio. She's also the co-imagineer of Compassionate USA, along with San Antonio's mayor, Ron Nirenberg, and she was named the city's 2023 Peace Laureate. Ann, thanks so much for being with us today. And do you mind just saying hello before we get to the questions?
I'll say howdy from Texas. It's so good to be here, and I'm really excited about sharing and talking with people.
Yeah, thanks for making the time with us.
Yeah.
Our intention today is not solely to present the action guide, so we felt it was helpful to learn about creative solutions happening in one community, one bright spot, San Antonio. So Ann, maybe you could begin by setting a little context. What are important ways San Antonians have collaborated to create social connection?
Well, we tend to focus on community development at the same time, right? So to bring people out of the isolation, but how can we create community and process? So a lot of the work that we've done has been very purpose-driven, common purpose, and forming collaboratives, intentional collaboratives around community concerns and needs. And which one of those is social isolation, but we also have some on violence prevention and housing and the community concerns that many of us know about and are familiar with. But we find that when we start to just open up the invitational process, people really want to be involved in caring for the community and have a voice in it. And so these collaboratives have really helped to pull people together in purpose, and then they become kind of magnetic, that other people just want to join in as well. And so we call it the benefits package, because what comes with those kind of collaborative efforts are relationships with some of the coolest people you'll ever meet that you didn't know before, type of thing. So we also do what are called community conversations on important topics. We have one coming up next week between the police department and the faith community. And what does violence prevention look like? And I know there are people who are coming because they experienced violence from the police department. And so, and other directions. So it's just a community conversation, and it also kind of has a magnetic pull. We've been doing those for probably a good half a dozen years. And I've got tons more if you want to keep me going.
I'm sure we could. This 10 minutes is going to fly by for sure. Earlier this year, as Jillian mentioned, you co-hosted a half-day community listening session to learn about social connection barriers, the assets, and we got beyond the questions just for today, where we got into potential solutions. So how did you decide who should participate when you helped us co-host a community listening session? And how did you get your partners into the room on a Saturday?
Well, it comes right back to that connecting with a purpose. So I started to think about community organizers, people who were trying to make connections in community around community needs and trying to figure out how to pull people together. And so I went to my own relationships within the community in terms of healthcare, resourcing, sustainability, the faith community, young people. We've seen such an increase of young people not coming back into the school system. So I just started to connect with folks who are doing those kinds of things. I wanted a cross-discipline look as well. I wanted people to be able to hear from others and learn from others that weren't necessarily always in their own conversations. And but it was based on relationships and social connection that I already had, professional connection. But I just started to invite them. And they came, and it was exciting. And we've done a lot of work since then in lots of different ways and in lots of different directions.
Great. So let's talk about that a little bit. So what do you believe some of the outcomes were, or maybe outcomes in progress? Did the session help motivate partners or begin to shift mindsets about the issue?
Well, in a sense, we were there and then practicing collaboration. Not that we were called in to do that. We were called in to listen and to tell what we know and to share. But I know some of the things that happened and came out of that were relationships. There were people in that room who had never met each other, didn't know about each other or the work that they were doing or purpose that they had in their own life. And so that was one of the definitive outcomes, were the developing relationships and working together across disciplines. Also, like learning ideas that do apply in lots of different places, and the importance of creativity. So we saw that too, like in the word cloud, all the different places that you can go, but all the different places that you can also go, even when you're working on a common purpose that could change the conversation by just where you were meeting, whether you're normally meet like in a boardroom or you decide to meet in a park once. So kind of a change of, they learned a lot of ideas from each other, but there's also some partnering that has happened because of our listening session, where people would totally different areas of the community never would have run into each other otherwise, and now have formed partnerships and have found strength within the community capacity, as well as new relationships. One thing that we're doing in October together in that group is that we're offering the action guide. We're pulling together a community collaboration, somewhat educational moment, but we're going to be pulling together folks around the action guide, from the folks within the listening sessions, but all of those networks. And that's one thing I wanted to mention with your first question, Phil, was networks. And that was also part of one of the poll questions. One of our greatest assets are our networks. And then to network the networks, to pull together the relationships that don't normally come together. That in itself, just casting the invitation to whatever we're doing as large as we can into, different sectors in different directions. And that can really bring like diversity. It can bring new ideas and new potential into the efforts.
Absolutely. And just for a little context, for folks who aren't familiar, these were half-day sessions in person, bringing Anne's amazing partners in to talk with intention just about social isolation and connection. So we asked these very same questions that we did in the Mentimeter before we moved on to the other parts of solutioning. So, Anne, with the time we have left, would you offer any advice to community leaders and organizers, the people here today that care about this issue? Maybe they don't know exactly where to start, or they have some initiative and they're not exactly sure how to layer it on that will focus specifically on social connection. What advice would you give?
Use the action guide. I wish I had had the action guide 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 10 months ago. Anywhere along the way, having an action guide that's been researched and compiled the way it has would have been really helpful. But some of us have had to go before and create and figure it out. But now we have the action guide, and I mentioned that we're going to be using it in San Antonio. And it's going to be used with people who are doing this work already, but those who aren't. So it'll provide a common language, which is also very important to culture and any shifts that we're trying to make in those directions. So the action guide in itself not only gives steps, but it gives common language, it gives ideas. But I think the other advice I would give is just start. And I know that probably everybody on this webinar are already in the midst of doing social connections and have started to begin where you are, but always have a vision of where you want to be and where you're headed. And for San Antonio, we're headed to community. We're growing fast, 7th largest city in the country, and we have a lovely sense of community. It's always been part of our character, and we don't want to lose that. But as we know, as we kind of grow bigger, we get more isolated in our own homes, and things get spread out and resources get spread out. So our efforts are really focused into creating and nurturing and developing community, because we believe that's how we will grow bigger, better. And we'll have community everywhere. So that's really an essential component to the vision in San Antonio. We want community and the sharing of what we hold dear and our resources and how we can help each other. And we're known for helping people after hurricanes, and we're known for welcoming over 500,000 this year, people migrating through the city. And we're known for that kind of welcome and hospitality, and we don't want to lose that as we grow larger. So community is key.
Thanks so much. Really helpful to hear it fleshed out from your perspective, and to know that what we've developed so far resonates with you in terms of a structure that could help people get moving forward. So thank you so much for your time and wisdom and story with us today, Anne. Having heard about the work and listening in San Antonio, let's dig in more to the action guide. Abigail, do you mind walking us through the action steps?
Great, thanks. I think the slides are coming back up, but first I'll just say, again, thank you so much to Anne and the other leaders that we co-hosted this community listening sessions with. I will talk about those again in a little bit. And just for championing just incredible work to advance compassion and connection in San Antonio. So grateful to learn from you and learn with you in this process, and I'm sure we'll continue to do that. So I'm now excited to share more about the action guide and welcome you to the action steps process, which you can see on the screen here. The ultimate goal of the action steps is to support you in developing, implementing, and growing sustainable social connection initiatives with a community team. And the 6 action steps are organized into 3 phases. First, learn and prepare. Second, make a social connection plan and then implement that plan. And third, evaluate and grow your movement. And we've set up this process to go step by step for incremental development, but don't feel tied to this specific order. We, of course, know that change isn't linear, and we invite you to jump in whichever step makes sense, jump around in whichever order makes sense for you and where you and your community are currently at. I'd also like to call your attention to these little icons that you can see at the bottom left of the screen here. Throughout the guide, we include these icons to note different activities and types of information. For example, the journey icon all the way on the left side here indicates an activity you complete in that step. So you'll see examples of these as we walk through the action steps, and you can also learn more about these icons by visiting the key that's found in step 1 of the guide. So you will likely start the action steps process with step 1, which is the community social connection reflection. And you got a bit of a taste of that already with the reflection that Phil led us through at the beginning of today's conversation. The goal for the first step is to reflect and begin brainstorming how you might use the action guide in your community. So first, we share some examples of social connection efforts being led by community-based organizations, local government leaders and staff, and business leaders to spark your own ideas. So this is, of course, not an exhaustive list of all the different leaders and change makers who are already doing social connection work, and we hope we'll use the guide, including many of you tuning in today. So throughout the guide, you will find many case examples and references to social connection activities that are being done by many different change makers. And we also welcome you at various points throughout the guide to share your examples and stories with us so that we can share that out with others, inspire others, and spark new ideas. And to do so, you'll always find a feedback form at the bottom of each page of the action guide site. So when we share that at the end, be sure to check that out, especially if you're thinking of something already. You'll then find the first activity of the action steps, which is the reflection activity. In this exercise, you will reflect on who is a part of your community, the strengths of the community that contribute to social connectedness, and the challenges and barriers to connection for all in the community. The aim of this initial reflection is to help you begin to narrow your focus. Is there a particular part of your community for whom you may want to focus efforts? What are the strengths that you can draw upon? And that becomes an easy starting point. Or alternatively, what's a really key challenge that you know you need to focus on to successfully advance social connection? Going through this exercise may also pinpoint gaps in your knowledge that are crucial for getting started. So if you're unsure, say, about the biggest challenges that are barriers to social connection, we encourage you to consider who you can discuss this exercise with to begin a conversation and increase your knowledge. And we also offer this step, the next step, to support growing your knowledge and ideas. And in step 2, you can gain a deeper understanding of what social connection is, why it's important, and how it impacts our health and our well-being by reading through the review of social connection and why it matters. Expanding your knowledge of social connection can help you develop new ideas about who to involve in the work and where you might focus your efforts, particularly in thinking about who may be at increased risk for social disconnection, which you can see is sub-step 5 on the screen here. So this is a particularly great step to spend time on or direct people to who are new to the social connection field and hoping to learn more. This step includes an introduction to the science behind social connectedness and how to define social connection, research on the current crisis of social isolation and loneliness, key stats on the effects of social disconnection on individuals and on communities, and an exploration of the cultural drivers of social disconnection. And much of this research draws upon the great research that was put together in the Surgeon General's advisory on the healing effects of social connection and community. I think I saw Becky put that in the chat earlier. So you'll find some of this information here, and we certainly encourage you to go continue to read and learn as you undertake social connection efforts. And lastly, as we discuss in this last sub-step 6 here, through the language of social connection section, we know that leaders are actively advancing social connection in their communities, although some initiatives may be labeled differently, right? For example, belonging, civic engagement, welcoming, compassion. These diverse terms encompass work to build social connection. So if you are currently engaged in or going to start a new social connection initiative, you might prefer using terminology that doesn't have the word social connection in it, but we know that that is social connection works happening. So we encourage you to do so while recognizing at its core, this is the work of fostering and building more social connectedness. This takes us to step 3, which is the community social connection assessment, where you will start to move from reading and reflecting on your own to learning with others in your community. This step includes 3 exercises that will enable leaders to make decisions driven by data, through relationships and partnerships, like Anne spoke about before, is so crucial for this work. And extremely importantly, through direct input and involvement of members of the community. So this can position you not only, just to take action, but to take action that's rooted in these three elements. And now I'll turn things over to Joanne, who will share a bit more about step 3.1 here. So the social connection data dashboard.
Thank you so much, Abigail, and thank you all for being here with us today to learn about the Action Guide. I'm really excited to present the Social Connection Data Dashboard, and first have to give a big shout out to our partners with IP3. I saw some of their teammates are joining us today. So folks, the online social connection data dashboard is an interactive tool to help community practitioners and coalitions conduct assessments to inform the development of strategies and initiatives to address social connection in their communities. Now, it's important to note that the indicators in the dashboard are intended to provide leads to find more data that will fit local community context. We know that context matters. The dashboard includes some resources to find that type of more local data. And there are also tools in the track and measure your progress section of the action guide that you can use to collect more data on your own. In the initial development of the dashboard, we had the opportunity to start with 15 indicators of social connection, and we do hope to add more in the future. Now, in selecting the indicators for the dashboard, we had to consider a few factors, and that included the best data that's available, also data that can be valuable for local leaders who want to develop initiatives for social connection in their communities. And another factor was that we really settled on using county level data. And that's because we felt that that would be the most applicable to the most dashboard users. Though the indicators that are currently in the dashboard are at the county level, I mentioned that there are tips and references about considering local community data, and that's provided in the dashboard as well. Now you see that the dashboard is organized into 3 sections. The individual indicators of social connectedness relate to how individual people within a community experience social connection or disconnection. The community social engagement indicators pertain to social engagement on a broader level and includes things like volunteering and civic engagement. And the broader policy, systems, and environmental indicators relate to the influence of the environment, systems, and policies within a community that influence social connectedness. So collectively, these data can provide some understanding of the condition of social connection in your county or community. And they suggest underlying factors that contribute to the condition and point to opportunities for change. For each dashboard indicator, you're going to see some specific information. First, a definition of that indicator, including how it relates to social connection and how to interpret and potentially use that indicator in a community assessment process. You'll also see color-coded benchmarking information that shows how the selected county compares to state and national data for that indicator. So in relative terms, green means it's doing better than the comparison benchmark, and red means that it's doing worse than the comparison benchmark. There's also a deepen your understanding section for each of the dashboard indicators, and that includes those resources I mentioned that provide further contextualization by looking at other factors and data in your community. Examples include any complementary local data and additional considerations for specific populations who may be experiencing social disconnection disproportionately. And along those lines, and because we know that some groups within a community tend to be disproportionately impacted by social isolation and other forms of disconnection, there is a special section of the data dashboard that includes a list of indicators for some of these groups so that you can be sure you consider them as part of your community assessment and strategy development process. Now, this list is not exhaustive, and we recognize that many people have intersecting identities that are not a member of only one of these groups. So as you use the dashboard, we encourage you to review this list and the indicators as leads to consider why individuals may be more at risk for social disconnection than others in your community, and then develop strategies so that all members of the community have equal opportunities to achieve social connectedness. The dashboard also provides guidance or reflection questions for you to use as you look at your county's data. And these reflection questions are great so that you can apply what you've learned from the data into the next steps in the action guide. Now let's look at a brief example of how a community coalition can use the social connection data dashboard. So I looked at 3 dashboard indicators for my home community, Pitt County, North Carolina, which is located in the eastern part of the state. So you see the first is a direct individual indicator of living alone, and it shows that my county's percentage is slightly higher or worse than both the national and state percentages. So this tells me that it's worthwhile to explore where people are living alone geographically within my county and what types of housing options are available there. So this further exploration is an opportunity to collaborate closely with my local housing and planning and zoning partners. At first look at the community social engagement indicator of volunteering, it seems like Pitt County is doing significantly worse than the national and state averages. However, this is where I want to bring in some personal lived experience. And I know from my networks that there are many small or independent organizations in my county that may not have formal mechanisms for documenting volunteer opportunities. There may also be community members who routinely give their time at their churches or community centers, but don't call it volunteering. It's just what they do. So with this indicator, I'd want to dig deeper to understand where the gaps and opportunities are in the county and bring in some lived experience. With the policy systems and environmental indicator of school segregation, we see that Pitt County is doing slightly better than both the national and state averages. This indicator measures the extent to which different race and ethnic groups are unevenly distributed in schools in comparison to the racial and ethnic composition of the community overall. Now, I've lived in Pitt County for almost 20 years, and I can attest to the fact that the county school board and district is intentional about the composition of the schools, and it's been particularly important when the county has experienced population growth. So again, bringing in the lived experience, I can feel pretty good about this indicator. So we encourage you to go through a similar process using your own county's data. And we'll be working with communities to get feedback and learn more about the ongoing usefulness of the dashboard. You can share your feedback with us using the info@ email, which will be shared later in the webinar. But now I'm going to turn things back to Abigail, who will walk through the other components of the Social Connection Community Assessment section of the Action Guide.
Great. Thank you so much, Joanne. So after reviewing the data dashboard in the community assessment process, it may become clear which partners you want to bring to the table, or you might need more time to consider who you can work with to advance social connection. So then introduce the second step of step 3 here of the community social connection assessment. You will find the partnership mapping exercise with the goal to identify strong partners. You'll start the exercise by developing a list of partners who can help you do one or a combination of the following 3 things. So first, who can help you understand social connection and disconnection in your community? Who could help you interpret the data, like Joanne just described, to really understand your community context? Who can help you understand who is experiencing social isolation, loneliness, and other forms of disconnection? And also importantly, who can help you understand what the systems, the infrastructure, the policies, and the community norms that are either bringing people together or keeping people apart? Second, who can help you outreach residents and community members, especially those who have been historically excluded and are often currently underrepresented in initiatives like this. And third, who can help you be effective in advancing initiatives. So this could be key decision makers, people who can provide resources and support, and those who can inspire collective action. And if you're thinking, I'm already in a coalition, I already have a collaborative of partners, this exercise can still be valuable to evaluate how you can leverage existing collaboratives for the goal of advancing social connection. And it may lead you to identifying gaps and people that you need to bring into your work to really do effective work moving forward in your current work group. Then you can tag these potential partners by the strengths of your relationships and their ability to influence and impact change in the community. And ultimately, and we hope this will help you complete a table like the one on the screen here, your social engagement partner engagement table, we hope then you can reach out to those people who make up this proposed list of engagement, and you can ask them to work together to collaborate and hopefully make this table a reality. And as Anne mentioned earlier, relationships and networks are so important, and we hope through this process too, you can form even stronger relationships going through the development process. And I'm now excited to talk about the final step of the community social connection assessment step, which is the community listening session. And as Jillian and Phil mentioned earlier, we developed this process to inform the development of the guide. You can see some photos of the process in action, and have brought it into the action guide process as well. And during the community listening session, you will convene members of your community to develop a shared understanding of the condition of social connection and brainstorm priority areas for change. And you can see all the different goals for this session, including informing a more complete understanding of the challenges and strengths of the community, elevating perspectives and voices, prioritizing and focusing social connection efforts, brainstorming ideas, and importantly, really beginning to create or reinforce a community of change makers who are dedicated to addressing social connection. So you might conduct the session or a series of sessions in person or virtually with the group. In the guide, we include some ideas about how you can develop an invitation list and create environments where everyone feels comfortable sharing. And when we co-hosted these sessions, we found that group sizes of about 15 to 20 people allowed time for everyone to express their thoughts and ideas and engage meaningfully. But the size, where you host these sessions and who attends will of course be based on what is most appropriate for you. And during the community listening sessions, we offer a series of discussion questions like some of the ones we started to talk about earlier today, to complete a community condition of social connection worksheet yourself, like the one you find here on the screen. So you'd begin by describing the meaning, strengths, barriers, and people that influence social connection in your community. And in the session, you would then also explore what you might do next and interrogate the data from the dashboard like Joanne mentioned. And the goal here really is to come away with a clearer sense of what people feel and believe about social connection and community, where you might focus efforts, and already starting a bank of ideas for what you might do for a social connection initiative. And if you conduct a session like this, we hope that you will go into the guide and let us know and pin yourself to this map with other communities. So far you can see the 5 places that we've tagged where we've co-hosted a community listening session so far. And we hope that this will continue to grow and show how people are connecting and coming together to address the issues of social isolation, loneliness, and disconnection. And as this map grows, we hope will also inspire other communities to do the same. Now, after completing the social connection community assessment phase, you should be poised to move from kind of exploratory conversations and preliminary ideas to making a plan and then implementing a plan in the next step, which is conducting a social connection workshop. First, you would invite a coalition of partners. This would become your social connection coalition, or perhaps this becomes a subgroup of an existing group or a part of an existing group that you're a part of, with those community leaders who are really committed to making progress to improve social connection, who are ready to get involved and actively contribute, and of course can bring diverse perspectives and ideas. And then it would be time to plan your workshop. We provide resources like invitation templates and sample agendas that you can edit and customize for full and half-day workshops. And there are lots of other guides and resources that you can find in the guide. My colleague Shannon will also share a bit more about promising strategies that we have gathered for the guide that could help prepare for an effective session. There are two major portions of the workshop. First, the vision and goal setting session, where you'd spend time to get clear and specific with the group about what your vision for a more socially connected community is. And we noted it's so important to spend time here really thinking about where are we not living up to our goals now, and what might we do in the future, and making sure you have a lot of diverse perspectives to be a part of what that vision looks like. And then spending some time to actually set some key goals for the group for both the short and the long term. And for some communities, this may already be clear. You may have a clear vision and plan for the future, so you can move kind of quickly to the planning phase, while others may choose to turn this into a longer session. And it may be really productive to spend time thinking about the vision and having discussions about where you hope to go. The second portion of the workshop, or it could be if you're doing two different sessions, the second session will really focus on creating an initiative plan that is a specific social connection plan and a timeline to really drill down to specifics, allocating responsibilities, setting milestones, and making a plan to measure and track change. And at the end of the workshop process, the goal would be for you and your coalition team to complete a social connection initiative plan using the template you can see on the screen or one like it, to create a plan for a period of time that feels feasible to you. And this is where you're really going to be getting into the specifics of what is our initiative to foster social connection in your community. So I'll now turn things over to my colleague Shannon, who will share more about the promising strategies you might consider including in your initiative plan.
Thanks, Abigail. I've included a glimpse into our promising strategies catalog here, and as you can see, there are a few tags for filtering the strategies, which are all explained in the catalog's key when you visit the guide. First is categories. The colored oval on the cards show a few of them. Second is the specific component that influences social connection. There's the structure, function, or quality of our relationships, which we'll be dropping a definition for those into the chat. And lastly, we have the age demographic that could benefit from the strategy. We did this because rather than have this be a prescriptive list to follow, we wanted to inspire you to mix and match strategies to fit your community's needs. When we were compiling this list, we pulled from evidence-based strategies that we've recommended in past research projects. We also looked at what local leaders have already developed and implemented to improve their communities. And then we included those that could be backed by research as promising strategies for connection. For example, the strategy on the right is pulled from Anne's work in fostering compassion. Next slide, please. This is what you'll find when you open up a strategy. By looking at the tags, you can see that adopting shared use policies for spaces would be a promising strategy if your desired outcome was increased connection, participation in the community, and a sense of belonging for all age groups. Again, there are those components of social connection. This one influences the structure and quality of our relationships. And you'll see one more category, which is if this strategy falls under a policy, system, or environment change. This is an important thing to consider when mixing and matching strategies, because a plan that has all three will help you create long-term sustainable change. And we'll drop more information about the PSC model in the chat. We also list the evidence that supports these strategies so you can understand how it would lead to our stated outcomes. And then there's an example of the strategy in action under our community implementation bit. Throughout all of this, we've also intentionally pulled examples from across the country so that all communities feel represented and find strategies that resonate with their needs. However, there is still so much more to capture, so we encourage everyone to review these strategies and let us know what you think should be added to our list. After you and your coalition plan your social connection initiative, step 5 provides recommendations for making a plan to track and measure your progress. This is important because it's how you'll determine if your initiative is achieving intended outcomes and identify areas for improvement. Collecting data can also be used to report your progress to partners in the broader community. This can build support to expand your initiative, and seeing the reported outcomes of your initiative can also inspire others to emulate or adapt it for their own community. In step 5, you'll also find recommendations for data collection sources and measurement tools and resources for loneliness, social isolation, community-level social connection, trust, and more. After this step, it's time to take action and implement your social connection initiative. Based on the work you've done, it may be appropriate to do step 6 sometime between 3 months to 1 year after you've implemented your initiative action plan, and possibly even set up evaluation intervals throughout. The goal for step 6 is to evaluate the data you collected with your step 5 plan, reflect on the initiative with your coalition members and other partners, and also understand how community members feel. Once you've gathered this information and reflected, we hope that you and your coalition team will share your accomplishments and lessons learned with others in your community. For information on how you might do this, we've included a communications plan with prompts like, where might we reach new stakeholders, or what successes and challenges might be the most compelling or important to share. Doing this can help adjust and expand your work. We also have an additional page with resources to build support and interest, like the flyer you see on the right of the screen. Although this is the final step of the guide, we hope that you'll continue to grow and iterate. For social connection to thrive in communities across the country, it's essential that every leader actively participates and is dedicated to driving change. We hope you will be a part of making and continuing this movement with us. And that being said, I'll now turn things over to Abigail to share with you what you can do next to get involved.
Great. Thanks so much, Shannon. And I hope, and I think I saw in the chat that some of you are ready to get involved, which is so wonderful. And for those who may be contemplating how you might use the action guide. So I wanted to share some ideas about what you might do next to get involved. To get started, you could take some simple steps outlined on the left side of the page here. First, we hope that you'll spend time clicking through and exploring the action guide to spark some ideas of how you might use it, whether it's integrating it into your work or launching something new. Next, we hope you'll consider sharing the guide with a partner, and like we've mentioned, reviewing the guide and sharing your feedback. We, of course, have been working with lots of different community members and researchers and different leaders in the field to share their perspectives. And there's still a lot more for us to learn now that we've launched the guide, and we really appreciate any thoughts and feedback that you have. And lastly, we hope that you will join our mailing list to stay up to date on any developments related to the guide and ways to get involved. And if you're already ready to dive deeper into the guide and begin your journey, first, you can reach out to our team and invite us to present the action guide at an upcoming coalition or work group meeting who you think may be interested in taking on this process and either starting or reinvigorating social connection work. And I'm also excited to share about an opportunity to actually get started with the action steps process. On November 28th, we'll be co-hosting a workshop with the Healthy Places by Design team as part of their local leaders network, where we are going to ask you to invite a team of 1 to 2 community partners and leaders to collaboratively engage in planning starting at the start of the guide. So this workshop will really be focused on helping you jumpstart your initiative and coalition planning. And we hope you'll consider joining us if that's where you're ready to jump in. And lastly, if you're feeling inspired and energized today, we hope you'll consider planning to host a community listening session and initiate conversations with potential partners and collaborators to kickstart social connection work in your community. And looking ahead, we'll have additional training resources that are coming through the pipeline from our team, as well as opportunities to join a cohort that will provide extra assistance for implementing the guide. And we'll be reaching more about that soon. So now I will turn things over to Joanne to share some questions we received. So please put any questions that you have in the Q&A chat. I know this is a lot to take in, and we'd love to answer any questions you have as you think about how you might use the action guide, whether it's starting something new or integrating it into your work. And I'll invite all the rest of my our co-presenters to join me on the screen.
Thanks, Abigail. So folks, you already see a poll that was posted on your screen. And so before we move to the Q&A, we want to learn from you. And there are two questions or two poll questions that we're going to keep up for just a minute or so before we go into questions. So want to give you time to read through the first one. How would you like to stay engaged with this work and check all that apply? Again, this is for our learning. Always want to get feedback about what's resonating with folks, how they think they might use the guide. Great. All right. And do we have a second question, poll question? Yes. Did this conversation spark new ideas for including social connection? So quick yes or no. I was peeking in on the chat and just saw how well you all were networking with each other. You were sharing contact information, sharing what you're doing. So that's really, really wonderful to see. All right. Thank you so much for indulging us and sharing a little bit of your feedback with us. So we'll cover a few questions that came in or some common questions. And folks, just want to reiterate that we are going to share the slide deck, resources, and there's also a frequently asked questions document that we will be sending you via email following this live presentation. So the first question I wanted to present, and I think this is for Abigail, is, the action guide really provides a nice stepwise process for coalitions to go through to incorporate social connectedness in their community strategies. Do they have to follow the action guide steps in a particular order?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's a really important one because although we've designed this in that stepwise fashion, we certainly don't want it to dissuade anyone from coming in. And if there's a step where you're just ready today to go and look at some of the resources on learning about social connection, we hope that you'll start there. Or if you're already involved in a collaborative that's doing work, or maybe you've even launched and implemented a plan and you haven't yet really thought about how you might measure and capture the effectiveness of that plan, jump in there, right? We'd love to also get feedback, from folks who look at the action guide and decide it doesn't make sense to do in sort of this chronological order. So it's, I think, a good process if you want to go in and take it step by step. And we've also really thought about how can each of these steps kind of stand on their own, and you'll kind of find everything that you need in that step to get involved at any place you're ready.
Wonderful. All right. In terms of the community listening session, so Phil and Anne, the conversation that you had really sparked people's interest in wanting to do something similar, like a community conversation. So one of the questions around that maybe one or both of you can address was thoughts about being able to do that virtually, because I think most of the community conversations were done in person. And then also, I think folks were thinking, like, how can they be part of that network of sites that were mentioned doing community conversations?
Well, we hosted a lot of community conversations during the pandemic, and they were all virtual. We have found, though, that hybrid is really difficult to try to do both in person and virtual at the same time. Although it can be done, but it's harder to do. Of course, but not exclusively. In person seems to be better because then we're, seeing real humans, and so much of our body language, is our language. But we got a lot out of community conversations. In fact, I would say that during the pandemic, those conversations might have been even more important in terms of social connectivity, because people weren't getting the same kind of conversations or depth in their lives. And I know I was totally isolated for 2 years, and I'm grateful for Zoom because I continue to see faces and meet new faces because of it. And it kept me connected.
Yeah.
So what was the second part of the question? How to get into that network? I don't know, but if you email me, and I can put that back into the chat again, when we might have other community conversations, I can email people and there might be a way to connect. We always do those conversations around 3, what we call beautiful questions. Really, it's just about inviting people together, and you're going to have a conversation on whatever it is. Our very first one was years ago, but it was on racism. So these can be on, topics that are difficult to talk about, as well as we've had them on voting and other things. But we come up with 3 questions that either move from the person to the larger nation or whatever, a larger community, or they work the other direction. So a larger view back down to like me.
Yeah.
So, and then we usually have some conversation starters. Some people call that a panel, but we have them in conversation, and then
Great.
everybody who's gathered picks up the same question and keeps talking.
Thanks. Jillian, did you want to jump in here?
No, I think that's great. Thank you so much, Anne. And I would just say, if you're in communities separate than, San Antonio or, part of San Antonio, we hope that you will reach out to us and let us know that you want to get involved. We're going to be following up from the session today with a brief survey. And in that, you'll be able to, mark down if you're interested in hosting a community listening session. If you're interested in engaging in future networks, we already do have, the Healthy Places by Design, a wonderful local leaders network that meets monthly and sometimes quarterly, but we're going to get back to a great cadence when we have, so many new faces from this webinar and other partnerships. And we really want to, invite you all to come on the November 28th to that local leaders meeting. And there we will dive even further and go through reflection and some other exercises, and start to think through, different cohorts of teams, of community teams that we can be working closer with. So that is all to come. That we understand that some of you have already let us know that you're interested in that work, and we are marking all of this down, and we'll be back in touch. I know Abigail mentioned, there's an interactive in the website where you can also add yourself to the map. So if you host a community learning or listening session and you would like to be added to the interactive map, we hope that you will let us know that you have hosted a conversation, and we can see all the new, dots light up on the map. So excited for all that's to come. And I'll turn it back to you, Joanne.
Yeah, thank you, Jillian, for that. So lots of opportunities to get involved in some of the specific ways that you included in your questions, folks. I know that there has been a lot of information, links shared not only by our organizations, but also by you all. Chat is not enabled to be saved. However, we can save the chat. We will make sure that the publicly available links will be sent out to you with the session materials from today. Now, if you shared your personal contact information, we cannot share that. We cannot share people's contact information just for privacy reasons. So I would encourage you to pull that if you can. Pull any information from the chat log that is not publicly available links. And we can maybe keep the session open for 5 minutes for you to make sure you have the links that you want to pull down. All right, let's see. So another question, and I think this is more about dissemination. So folks are energized by what they saw today, the presentation, and they want to share it with others in their community or broader. So I'm not sure if this is for Shannon or Ashley, but maybe you can talk a little bit about the communications toolkit.
Yeah, I can take that on. We have under the building support, like I said in step 6, we've done a lot of collateral So that way you know how to, what to pitch, what kind of content. Some of the things include frequently asked questions like what you might field from your community. So that way you have a response that you can give them that's informed by research. We also have some social media stuff that you can put out if you'd like to do that on your channels. And then we also have an interactive activity where you brainstorm who you would reach out to, what kind of network it would be, and what you would tell them and whatnot. So Ashley, if I missed anything, feel free to jump in, but I encourage everyone to check it out.
Yeah, it's a great resource to have that toolkit to communicate. All right, so there was a big question about how do we get funding to do all of this social connection work? It's a great one, and I think we as a partnership are figuring that out too. But what we do know, folks, that it takes everyone to be involved. It takes private sector, philanthropy, government entities, and I know we've got some partners here who have worked with some specific government programs that are incorporating socially connected community strategies into state and county level work. So it really takes, think about the multi-sector approach. But if you have ideas for ways to fund this work, you know, it can be through grants, certainly, but it can also occur through institutionalization. So looking at your own organizational policies, are your policies written with a lens on social connectedness, and things like that? But I would want to welcome Jillian too to comment on just, you know, the importance of all hands on deck with getting funding and support for socially connected communities.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. I would just echo what you've said so eloquently. I think it takes a village, and we can think about resources in different ways. Of course, financial is helpful as we start to build out our initiatives, but also looking at people as incredible assets and gifts of the community, and spaces that perhaps can be donated, and other, aspects of, as we think about the different resources we need to do this work. So absolutely agree. I think partnership mapping, I'll call it out, is a great way to look at who are the organizations in your community and county that might be interested in partnering and investing, whether it be for profit, whether it be, public dollars that you can tap into, grants otherwise. So we will continue to feed back this information to you all. I think that we will be doing a lot of collective learning, and my guess is that this will be a topic of conversation for our communities of practice to come. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Joanne, if I could just add, I agree with all of this. I think this is an opportunity to start having a dialogue with the funders that you have. There are opportunities to weave in social connection as an equal goal or objective as the other things that you're working on. We're really seeing social isolation as a determinant of health, like some of these other social determinants of health. So I think you can make a pretty strong case to those that you're already working with. And in many cases, it's a matter of finding in kind and people devoting their time. You can get started even without a big grant. And so I think that, so see resources more broadly.
Yeah.
And there's no reason you need to wait for the social connectedness grant to come. You can start looking for those now and ways to weave it in, or have, look to develop a relationship with funders who might see this overlap in terms of their own mission and objectives.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Phil. And I see Amber Smith's question in the chat. One approach is to make sure folks understand that we're not asking anybody to do anything new. Social connectedness is really a lens to do your work, to address social determinants of health. And with one funder that we worked with in particular, we actually first did an inventory of their current investments and showed them all the ways that they're already doing social connections work. They didn't call it that, but they were doing it. And so start again, asset-based, show them that they are already doing this work, but maybe call it out a little bit more and build from there. All right, well, folks, we are not going to keep you any longer than we need to. Remember, be on the lookout for an email with all of the resources from today's live session. And then remember to use that info@ email that maybe Becky can chat out again to everyone, because we do want to hear from you. We want to hear ideas. We want to hear about your needs so that we can also leverage all of that. So thank you to the team, everyone you see here, as well as those that I know are on that were very instrumental in the behind the scenes development of the action guide. And just again, want to thank you all for spending time with us today and wish you well. Be well, everyone.
Thank you all so much. Be well.